On today's episode of the Mark Titus Show, we're not even to Christmas yet, and the Chicago State Cougars now have transitive property wins over. This is a long list. So stick with me. But this is incredible. This is very exciting for Chicago State. Purdue, Arizona, Kansas, UConn, Marquette, Tennessee, Duke, Kentucky, North Carolina, UCLA, Indiana, Michigan State, Baylor, Gonzaga, Villanova, Creighton, Virginia, Wisconsin, many, many others. It's not even Christmas yet, and now that Purdue beat Arizona, Chicago State is on top of the college basketball world, I think. I think that's how that works. So I moved to Chicago. I promised that the city of Chicago would win a championship within 5 years of me moving here. Promises made, promises delivered. Chicago State has a transitive property win over basically every good team in college basketball except Houston, who's still undefeated, which we'll talk about. But anyway, that's going to be fun all year. I'm not going to get sick of that as teams keep beating each other. I'm going to be like, yeah, Chicago State, transitive property win. What a weekend it was in college basketball. Purdue beats Arizona in the game of the weekend. Braden Smith, Fletcher Lawyer, absolutely unconscious. Purdue fans are begging on their hands and knees, begging for some recognition on the cold-ass white boy power rankings from these two guys. I said Purdue guys don't qualify because they play for Purdue, and that's just, unfortunately, that's just how it works. And all the Purdue fans don't like that, and they're saying, now hang on a second, what about an exception for these two cold-ass white boys? I'm not doing one today. We're not going to do cold-ass white boy power rankings today, but maybe that's my Christmas gift. We're going to do one more show this week before we take the holiday break, so maybe we do it then, and yeah, I don't know. We'll see. I have a lot to think about. But yeah, Purdue beats Arizona. Great game. Talk about that, obviously. Kansas comes back to beat Indiana in a game they kind of had no business winning. Trey Galloway was awesome for the Hoosiers. Kansas was just too poised, too unfazed, too much Bill Self, too much Kevin McCullough hitting free throws down the stretch. It was just like, it was one of those games where like Indiana outplayed them the entire game, and then in the end it was like, that's why you're Kansas and that's why you're Indiana, and unfortunately there's nothing you can do, Indiana. But yeah, Kansas kind of had no business winning. Still not sure what to make of this Kansas team. I don't think they're good, but they also win, and that's kind of important if you want to be good, is to win. Very confusing. We'll try to make sense of this Kansas team. Kentucky holds off North Carolina in an awesome CBS Sports Classic game. Ohio State, by the way, holds off UCLA in a stinker CBS Sports Classic game. Michigan State is back from the dead. They blow out Baylor. Memphis hands Clemson its first loss. Houston keeps rolling. There's a ton to recap from the weekend. The best way for me to do it, I went with this. I'm going to go through 3 answers that I got from the weekend. From watching, I had questions about certain teams, certain players, whatever else. I feel like I got some answers over the weekend, but then also 3 more questions arose from the weekend action. So we're going to do it that way. We're going to do three answers I got, 3 questions I now have, and that's how I'm going to attack everything that went on in college basketball this weekend. Let's get into it. All right, some housekeeping at the top. So we're recording this early on Monday morning. It's not coming out till Tuesday. There are really no games today. Actually, let me stop. I misread that, actually. I'm going to stop. Let me start over, TJ. I thought Virginia-Memphis played tonight. I now see that's tomorrow night, so we're good. All right, great weekend of college basketball. Purdue beats Arizona. We went through them all. That was, to me, it was a game that delivered. Purdue was pulling away, and Arizona made it interesting in the end. We'll talk about it. But yeah, all the games were really good. I think on the macro picture, what am I doing? I'm stepping all over the segments. Let's just do the segments. So these are the 3 answers I got from watching all the college basketball this weekend. Number 1, the first answer is that this is not Gonzaga's year. It's something that I felt very early in the season. You look at Gonzaga's roster, you look at like the recruiting they've been doing. It's not been as great as it has been in the past. I know they got Ryan Nembhard in the transfer portal and EK from Wyoming. But like this roster was not a national title, Final Four caliber Gonzaga roster. And I had felt that, but I also want to give teams a chance. And also I am one of those idiots that sometimes uses logic of like, if you're not as good as the teams you've been in if this team is not as good as teams have been in the past at that same program, then this team can't be as good as, can't have as much success as the team in the past had, if that makes sense. Like the great example is the Kansas team that won the national title a couple years ago. I didn't feel like that was a better Kansas team than some of the other teams that came before it. So it's hard for me sometimes to like not be a moron basically, and realize that like that Kansas team didn't have to play the Kansas teams of the past. They had to play the teams that were in college basketball in that particular season. So all that is to say, like going into the year, I looked at this Gonzaga team and I was like, yeah, this Gonzaga team does not look nearly as good as some of the Gonzaga teams of the past. But at the same time, if they prove to be better than the teams in college basketball this year, who gives a shit? If they still could go to the Final Four, maybe they could, maybe they could play their way into a national title caliber team. That's not happening. That's just not happening with this Gonzaga team. And I think we definitively got that answer when they played UConn on Friday. UConn was in total control of the game, the entire game. Ryan Nembhard and Anton Watson did all they could to keep it close, keep it interesting. But UConn is just in a different weight class right now to me. UConn is a couple tiers above Gonzaga, at least this year's team. But then even going back to last year, I mean, UConn beat the shit out of them in the NCAA tournament too. So yeah, I think this Gonzaga team, they could go to a Sweet 16. They could, but it starts to get interesting because you're looking at their tournament resume. They're going to make the tournament, but right now their best win is either UCLA or USC, two teams that, good, not great. Purdue and UConn handled them pretty easily. I mean, Purdue and UConn kind of showed how much ground there is. If Gonzaga has national title aspirations, they have a lot of ground to make up in a hurry. And the non-conference games they have left, with the West Coast Conference being a little bit down this year and BYU no longer being in the conference, they're going to have to make a big splash in non-conference play to get a good seed to then win the games in the NCAA tournament, and go on the run that Gonzaga fans are accustomed to. And I think their non-conference has not been all that great. Again, they beat UCLA and USC, but at this point last year, Gonzaga had beaten Alabama, who was the number 1 overall seed in the NCAA tournament last year. They'd beaten Xavier. They'd beaten Michigan State. They had beaten Kentucky. And they just don't have like those marquee wins right now. Now they go to Kentucky in February. But otherwise, they have Jackson State and San Diego State. Those are their next 2 games. San Diego State's another good, not great team this year. I think they've taken a step back. So those become huge games for Gonzaga if they want to get a better NCAA tournament seed. But it's feeling the way it's trending right now, and based on the WCC not being great, we're like, St. Mary's had the big win against UNLV in double overtime, and maybe they're starting to figure some stuff out. But Gonzaga, if we're going to assume that they're going to lose a couple in conference play, and you look at what they've done in non-conference play, I mean, they're looking like a 5 or a 6 seed in the NCAA tournament, which you could go on a run. That doesn't mean you're not making a Final Four or whatever, but it just makes it a lot harder. And I think that's kind of what the lesson I got from Friday night is that this Gonzaga, if you're a Gonzaga fan that is waiting to see the national championship that you thought was coming in 2021, I think you're going to have to wait another year. This team does not feel the roster is just not good enough to me. I mean, they have guys that can look good in spurts, but UConn was just a completely different animal. For that game to be taking place in Seattle and UConn to just like so professionally dismantle Gonzaga that entire game, it really did just look like UConn was. I don't know what the analogy would be. I mean, I don't want to say UConn was an NBA team and Gonzaga was a college team. That seems a little dramatic, but like UConn was like if this is like high school basketball, they're like the top level. They're like the 4A team, and UConn's like a good 2A team, or I don't know. Whatever the analogy is, like they just looked like it looked like if they played that game 10 times, UConn would have won at least 9. I mean, like it looked like Gonzaga just had no hope or prayer, and that their personnel was never gonna match up with UConn. So that's answer number 1 I got from the weekend, is that this is not going to be Gonzaga's year, and that's okay. That doesn't mean you have a bad program or that the team is a failure or anything else. It just means Gonzaga is the number 1 program I think left in college basketball that everyone's waiting to see win a national championship, given how often they've been knocking on the door, and I don't think that door is going to open this year. Number 2 lesson I learned. RJ Davis is North Carolina's best player, and I didn't necessarily need the Kentucky game to drive this home. RJ Davis, but it certainly helped. I mean, Armando Bacot is out there, and he's just kind of a dinosaur to me. I have not loved Armando Bacot for years. I've appreciated what he brings to the table. I don't think he's a bad player. But like the Armando Bacot is the guy that makes the all ACC teams. Armando Bacot is like the guy that gets all the Player of the Year discussions and All-American discussions and all that sort of thing, and he's kind of the face of North Carolina. Caleb Love sort of was last year because of the shot against Duke and the run that they go on. Had kind of made him a household name. But as far as like voting on all the awards and all the individual accolades, it's Armando Bacot because he's the stat sheet stuffer. And if you've watched Carolina this year, R.J. Davis is what makes them go, and R.J. Davis is the guy that is their best player, and it's something that's been pretty evident to me, and it just was driven home during this Kentucky game. Kentucky won, by the way. Obviously, everyone saw that Kentucky had a big lead, started to choke it away. They are all over the place. This Kentucky team is so fun to watch, especially if you don't care if they win or lose. Rob Dillingham just like jacking up Rob Dillingham, it was absolutely gunning in this game. Kentucky's guard depth is incredible. I love this Kentucky team so much. And again, I say that as a guy that doesn't care whether they win or lose. That's what makes it so fun. Is because as Kentucky is shooting themselves out of the game, I don't mind it because it's the game's getting up and down, and it's a ton of fun. But then Dillingham makes plays. Reed Shepherd's awesome. But R.J. Davis had 27 against Kentucky. He kept it close for Carolina. He's on an absolute scoring tear right now. He's averaging 27.4 points per game over his last 5 games. And those are games against Arkansas, Tennessee, Florida State, UConn, and Kentucky. Those are 5. These are not 5 mid-majors. These are not 5. I mean, Florida State's not as awesome, obviously, as the rest of the group, but those are 4 out of those 5 games are heavy hitters. And, I mean, Arkansas's, I guess, not been awesome either, but you know what I'm saying. This was a gauntlet for Carolina, and R.J. Davis is averaging 27 a game over the course of those 5. I just think that, like, Bacot, to me, I don't know, maybe it speaks to, like, a larger thing at play where I'm kind of over big men in general in college basketball. Like, the Kansas is another good example. That Hunter, who I talk about often on this show, obviously, I do think he's good. His stat sheet obviously pops. You look at the stats at the end of a game, and Hunter Dickinson's always finding a way to get like 22 points and 12 rebounds and all that. But when you're watching the flow of the game, you're like, that's not – like I don't think Kansas would really be that screwed without Hunter Dickinson. And I don't think Carolina would really be that screwed. Like he's not the actual MVP. I don't know. There's just something about the big dudes in college basketball, and maybe Zach Edey's the one exception, but college basketball people get so enamored with big guys. And oftentimes when they're out, I mean, this happened. I've used these examples before, but like Illinois, when Kofi Cockburn was playing at Illinois and he would get in foul trouble, like the commentators just like could not resist pointing out, they're like, Illinois might be fucked because Kofi's going out. But then Illinois would actually be just fine with Kofi being out. And the guards would have more freedom of movement, and he's not clogging the lane. And same thing with Indiana and Trace Jackson Davis. I mean, when Indiana pulled off the upset of Purdue that one year, and when Trace Jackson Davis got in foul trouble, and then the guards started. That was a couple years ago, the Finney game. It was the same sort of deal where it was like, Trace Jackson Davis is their best player. Now they're gonna have to play without him because he's in foul trouble. But then it gives guards so much more freedom, and that's kind of where I'm at with North Carolina. Is like Bacot is going to be the guy that everyone is pointing to as like, dude, he's a double machine. And did you see his stat line last night? But R.J. Davis is the team. I mean, R.J. Davis is running the show, and having Caleb Love out of the way and giving R.J. Davis more scoring opportunities has been great for him individually. Carolina, I still think is a good team. I'm still trying to figure out. I mean, I guess maybe that's one of the questions I have coming out of the Kentucky-Carolina game is how good is Carolina really? The Cadeau turnover at the end of the game was pretty egregious. But I've liked what I've seen out of him this season so far. He's not like a Kobe White caliber freshman point guard, but he's been pretty good, pretty solid for Carolina. But that turnover was rough. The throwing it to Cormac Ryan off his back at the end of the game, obviously. But yeah, RJ, that's one of the things I walked away from this weekend watching Carolina Kentucky. I was like, all right, the debate is settled in my mind. RJ Davis is their best player. RJ Davis is going to carry this team. However far Carolina goes, it's going to be because RJ Davis is playing out of his mind, and he is playing out of his mind right now. So shout out to RJ Davis. And shout out to Kentucky and Carolina in general. Every time they play each other, it feels like it's a classic. I love when these two play each other. I think both fan bases would prefer that this happen on campus, and I certainly would too. I think they're over the CBS Sports Classic. But whatever it takes to get them to play, it's awesome. I I'm fine with them both backing out of the CBS Sports Classic. But if they do, I hope they set up a situation where they both play each other on campus, which I'm sure Hubert Davis would be down for. John Calipari, you never really know. You never really know what's going on in that guy's head when it comes to scheduling. But he also scheduled a game in Assembly Hall coming up, and he's going to retire before that game takes place. So maybe this isn't a John Calipari thing. Maybe when Cal leaves, Carolina and Kentucky can get back to playing on campus, because when those two play each other, it feels like a classic every time. Two programs that are historically guard dominated. They love running up and down. They love that's the formula. They just, you have guards and you have tempo, and they just get up and down and throw up shots. Sometimes they're stupid shots, but more often than not, they're great shots that go in. Like, it's two programs that coach their guys to basically just shoot when you're open, and especially when they have talent. I know some of Cal's tried to like coach that out of them, but like this team in particular, it's like, yeah, man, if you're open, Rob Dillingham, fucking let that thing fly. And Antonio Reeves, let that thing fly. And Carolina's always been that way. Carolina's always pushing tempo. If you're open, shoot it. And when those two get together, it just feels like a classic every single time. So I love it. I love the CBS Sports Classic, but also I don't want it to end, because it's a nice thing that Ohio State is included in, if I'm being completely honest. And so if they end it and Kentucky and Carolina want to play each other on campus, I think I'm okay with that. Number 3, as far as answers I got, Purdue's guards have a high enough ceiling to win a national championship. I think that might be controversial to some people to say. Coming off the Arizona game, if you are someone who doesn't believe that, you're probably not really chirping too much right now, because Fletcher and Lawyer were bananas against Arizona, and that is what you point to with Purdue. Purdue is basically the exact same team as they were last year. This played itself out in this game where Painter plays Camden Heide 7 minutes and Miles Colvin 4 minutes, and he just went to a really tight bench and leaned on his veterans. And you looked up, and it was basically the exact same Purdue team as last year, except Lance Jones is in place of David Jenkins. And otherwise, it's like this is the exact same team. And to me, maybe I'm reading too much into it, but Purdue playing the number 1 team in the country on a neutral floor, where the whole world is watching on Peacock for a low price of $5.99 a month, I assume. I don't know. I still don't understand how I got Peacock. I watched this game. I went to Peacock and logged in, and I'll be damned, it worked. And I have no idea how or why, because I'm certainly not paying for it. But one of my takeaways from that, though, is like Painter leaning on all of his veterans is, I do think as the season progresses and Purdue starts finding themselves in higher and higher leverage games, which Purdue's played a gauntlet so far. Purdue's schedule has been insane, but as the season wears on and, you know, you're 2 games up in the Big Ten race with 4 to play or something like that, and like all these games just feel a little bit more monumental, and the NCAA tournament is looming and all that, I do think Matt Painter, as great of a coach as he is, part of what his problems have been in March is I do think he gets a little set in his ways and a little. So there is sort of a fear of that. It's like I don't want Painter to just lean on the exact same group as last year, because obviously last year's group lost to a 16 seed, right? You need some fresh blood. You need some. Now we've talked about this before. Lance Jones is much better than David Jenkins, and maybe that's all the fresh blood they need. But the thing about Purdue has always been and will always be with this current era of Purdue basketball is, can you trust these 2 guards? Last year you could not. I said it all year. Purdue fans killed me. If you watch Purdue, it was like, yeah, they're winning, but like 2 freshman guards that are throwing the ball all over the gym when they get pressured, that is not going to work. It doomed them in the end. I still think if you watch the Arizona game, got a little dicey there. Arizona goes zone, and they speed up Purdue a little bit and then fall back into the zone, and Purdue got a little flustered and is throwing it all over the place. And the formula still looked to be there, but my God, Braden Smith and Fletcher Lawyer they've been so good this year. They've been so good, and not just like catch and shoot situations either. I think the misconception, if you don't watch a lot of Purdue, is that you look at a box score at Purdue and you see these 2 now sophomore guards in Smith and Lawyer. I mean, Smith had 26 points, was 4 for 7 from 3. Lawyer had 27, was 5 for 9 from 3. And the assumption might be that Zach Edey's getting doubled and he just kicks it out to them and they hit wide open threes, and that's the formula. Is dump it into Edey, draw the double, throw it to a wide open guy, and have him hit threes. Braden Smith's a playmaker. Braden Smith is a cold ass white boy for sure. Is he going to be on the cold ass white boy power rankings? I don't know. We'll see. I'll have to see what the committee decides there. But Braden Smith is a playmaker, making shots in mid range and setting up teammates and all that sort of shit. Like he's been incredible. He's definitively good. And the part of you, and I'm talking to my dad. I'm talking to you, the Purdue hater, my father. The part of you that thinks that Braden Smith is not good is the residual from last year where you kind of saw him. You know, he's a freshman. He's a true freshman. That's not a NBA first round pick. And as it turns out, big time college basketball can swallow those guys alive at times. I trust him way more this year. Having said all that, I think the formula remains the same. I think Arizona proved that the way to beat Purdue is to speed them up, is to, when you're playing defensively. I think Arizona's mindset was doubling Edey is the move, which it kind of is. But I think in general you have to just like incite chaos on Purdue. I think if you're going to beat Purdue, it's not enough to just double Edey. He's a good passer and he knows the double's coming. But you have to you have to bring the double from all over. And Arizona goes to that zone and they they get back into the game. And everything's working, and then all of a sudden they start like very aggressively doubling Edey from the ball side without rotating over and just leaving dudes wide open, and the zone starts to fall apart. But that's the thing with this Purdue team is you watch how dominant they are, and for stretches against Arizona, it was like, holy shit, like Purdue, it's Purdue and everybody else for the national title this year. I mean, who's going to stop these guys? If Edey's playing as well as he plays every single game, and these guards are playing at this level, I mean, their ceiling is insane. But at the same time, there's always the Achilles heel, and every Purdue fan, as much as they want to stick their chest out after the game and say we beat the number one team in the country and we're rolling, and they have had a tough schedule and they won the Maui Invitational, and everything is coming up Purdue right now, in spite of the loss to Northwestern, which was an overtime, and I don't think that sinks their season by any stretch of the imagination. I think a lot of Purdue fans are feeling good about their team. Every single one of those Purdue fans also knows deep down, as that stretch where Arizona was coming back was happening and the scoring drought's happening with Purdue, you were saying, here we go again. And that, I think that's going to be a consistent theme with Purdue. Now, why is that? Like, is it because we can't trust the guards? I think we can. It's just like their teams will start to get desperate against Purdue because Purdue is very, very good. And you're going to realize that if you play them straight up, you're not going to have a ton of success against it. You have to have some sort of curveball that you throw at them, whether it is an Arizona team that's played 0 possessions of zone all season going to a 2-3 zone, whether it's a team that doesn't really press saying, fuck it, let's throw a run and jump at him. You have to throw some sort of chaos at them. And yes, when you're watching Purdue and you're watching the guards throw it all over the place when chaos is introduced to the game, it is easy to point the finger at them and be like, see, they can't handle the moment. But at the same time, I do think a lot of college basketball teams would be in the exact same situation. I think there are very few college basketball teams that if you were playing against them and you defensively just start throwing shit against the wall to see what sticks, and you just have a bunch of dudes run around chaotically out there, I think a lot of teams would struggle with that and be like, and would look at the bench like, what the fuck is going on here? What the hell is this? We didn't prepare for them to play zone. We didn't prepare for them to press us like this. So yeah, I think Purdue's guards have a high enough ceiling to win a national championship. It feels weird to say because you kind of need an NBA caliber guard to win a national championship. That's what the logic will tell you. But I don't know. Maybe this is controversial. I think Braden Smith could play in the league. I think Braden Smith could eventually play in the league. He's small, but yeah, he's got a ways to go. But dude, his skill set is nice. He's nice with it now. So I think eventually he's not going to go this year. But yeah, after a few years in college, and he's on a trajectory. If you told me that I'm going to look up and see that Braden Smith is logging minutes in an NBA game, like 8 years from now, I wouldn't be absolutely stunned by that. Which last year I probably would have been, if we're being completely honest. So I have learned that lesson from the weekend. I do think Purdue's guards have a high enough ceiling. The problem is we're still trying to figure out what the floor is with those guys and Purdue as a whole. I'm just gonna stop talking about Purdue because we're gonna talk about Purdue a lot, and I'm gonna keep making the exact same points. I think Arizona is on the right track. I think Arizona has a great team still, by the way. But when Purdue is playing that well, they are going to be very, very hard to beat. If Braden Smith and Fletcher Loyer are that awesome, but it'll be interesting because Painter is leading on the same group, and we'll find out soon enough. As the season wears on. But Purdue fans are really feeling themselves, man. Boy, they're really fired up about this team. They chirping at Coach Titus like crazy. I'm getting so many tweets about my dad. Every time Purdue wins now, they're like, "Where's your dad now, bitch?" And I'm like, he's probably like that's you can't beat my dad. That's what I want to say to everybody. It's like you think Purdue could win the national championship. I could have my dad on the show that night, and he would lay out with logic that makes sense to him, exactly why Purdue is fraudulent and not that good. He could. He's an expert. So, he's got his PhD, his Purdue Hayden degree. That's what I've always said.
Also, like, how many times are Purdue fans going to brag about being good? Every single year they have opportunities to do this, and every single year it comes crashing down on them in the most Purdue way possible.
Right.
So at what point are you going to just, let the season run?
I do think, though, Purdue as a program and a culture does need that a little bit, though. Like, you're absolutely right. We've seen this story a million times before with Purdue, and they always fuck it up. But I do think you got to just, like, stop doing the woe is me shit as a team, as a fan base, as everything. And at some point, you do have to put your foot down and say, no, enough's enough. I don't care about what's happened for the last 40 years. Purdue's never won a national championship, but they haven't been to Final Four since 1980. At some point, you as a program just put your foot down and you say, enough's enough. I don't give a shit about any of this. By God, we're going to the Final Four. Like, we are. We're going to the Final Four. It's happening. And by the way, I said that before the season started, Purdue's going to the Final Four. I stand by that. Purdue to the Final Four. Purdue is definitively going to go to the Final Four. I as I'm watching all these games, I'm trying to figure out who the other three teams are going to be because I've already, in Sharpie and whatever you want to call it, I have already put Purdue in my bracket in the Final Four. Literally nothing can go wrong. And if it does, I am pulling my donations. So it's as simple as that. All right, 3 questions that arose from the weekend. So I got those answers. I found out Gonzaga is it's not Gonzaga's year. It's not going to be Gonzaga's year. R.J. Davis is North Carolina's best player, and everything should run through him, which it already is. And most Carolina fans are like, dude, you're months late to this, if not years. But, whatever. We're all here now. And number 3, I do think Purdue's guards, I've worked under the assumption that Purdue's guards will ultimately be their downfall, and they still could be, but I think if Purdue's guards play like they did against Arizona in the NCAA tournament, in the Final Four, if this is a rematch, if what we saw with Purdue-Arizona is a rematch in the Final Four in the national championship, I don't know how you can walk away from that game and be like, yeah, but I don't know if Purdue's guards have what it takes on that stage. They do. They do have what it takes. It's just a matter of whether they can bring it on that particular night. Quick break to talk about our friends at Body Armor. The Mark Titus Show is brought to you by Body Armor. Real hydration, real ingredients packed with electrolytes, vitamins, and nothing artificial. Body Armor has great tasting flavors like strawberry, banana, and blue raspberry. Not only do we hydrate with Body Armor, but some of the best athletes in the world do as well, like Christian McCaffrey, maybe the MVP of the NFL. Joe Burrow, Ronald Acuna Jr., CeeDee Lamb, and Bryce Young. We love Body Armor around these parts. Every single show I do, I'm chugging the sport water, but the strawberry banana, I've been known to throw 1 or 2 back in my free time. Love the taste of that one. Just love Body Armor in general, and you will too. Body Armor is available in stores nationwide, but you can head over now to the Body Armor store on Amazon and get yours today. Body Armor. 3 questions I have now. Number 1, the big one is Michigan State back or is Baylor just fraudulent? Michigan State absolutely blew out Baylor. It was a boat race. It was 21 turnovers for Baylor. It's 45-17 at halftime. Michigan State was up 30 for most of this game. Baylor kind of feels like a finesse bitch team. Baylor, and it feels crazy to say because they won the national title. Yes, their offense was awesome, but like they had some bulldogs defensively on that team. They were more of an offensive-minded team, sure. But the defensive culture in that program was insane. With Davion Mitchell and Jared Butler and Maceo, like those guys were nasty defenders. They just happened to be unstoppable on offense. So yeah, like if you watch that Baylor team, the offense is what stood out to you. But I mean, they were nasty defensively. The last couple years, Baylor has completely lost that edge. Last year they were just a jump shooting team that had no interest in playing defense whatsoever. This year it feels like more of the same. They do have a ton of great guards. They can score the basketball when they get rolling, but my God, they feel like a finesse bitch team with jump shots and no defense, and letting Michigan State just get out in transition and dunk all over them. It was crazy to watch, but in retrospect, maybe it shouldn't be that surprising. Michigan State, for all their problems, a couple problems they don't have is they have never really had a toughness problem. Like even when I was watching them in the Champions Classic against Duke, Duke was the better basketball team for sure, and Michigan State couldn't make anything. But Michigan State was kind of punking them's a little strong. I guess you can't punk a team if you're losing, but like they were very clearly the more aggressive and physical and tougher team. It was just Duke had better players, and that's why Duke beat them. So Michigan State going up against a Baylor, and Michigan State having the toughness that they've had all season and that edge to them, they just can't shoot. They still play defense. They could still run the floor. I think the tempo stats, I think like Ken Palm's little tempo algorithm, whatever, says that Michigan State doesn't play that fast. But anybody that pays any attention to Tom Izzo basketball knows that they do like to run. When given the opportunity, they will push tempo. So I think like going up against a Baylor team that likes to run, likes to shoot jump shots, doesn't play great defense, maybe as you look back on it, it shouldn't have been that surprising that Michigan State won by like this. This happened to Baylor also against Marquette last year, where they just got smacked in the face and looked like a team that had no business being on the same court as another top caliber team. The difference this year is Michigan State was left for dead after they started 4-5, and now here they are blowing out the number 6 team in the country in Detroit. So yeah, I don't know where I lean on this. I don't know if this told me more about Michigan State or Baylor, because I still think Michigan State, like the issue, the things that worked well for them in this game have never really been the issue. I don't think like them being tough and playing defense and pushing tempo when they want to, and Tyson Walker being awesome, like all of these things have been consistent all year for me, at least. The games I watched, I haven't watched every Michigan State game, but every time I watch them, I'm like, yeah, at least they have all that. What they don't have is shooting, and they what they don't have is half-court offense. And Baylor allowed them to get out and run a little bit and run up the score on them. And I do think, like, you look at the result, you say, all right, Michigan State is definitely back. But then I also think that when Big Ten play rolls around and you see Michigan State having to run a little more half-court offense and find some shooter other than Tyson Walker, and they're going to have to find those answers that I don't know if they fully got from Baylor, but obviously an awesome result, and obviously the kind of thing that program needed to instill some confidence. And yeah, I do think Baylor. I mean, obviously you get your ass handed to you like that, you have a lot of questions coming out of the game, but like it does sort of feel like Baylor's lost that edge defensively. It feels like Baylor at the program has gotten to a point where they can score the basketball and they can, produce NBA caliber guards. But I don't know if they're going to be successful like they've been in the past. Like, even never mind the national championship game. I mean, that's been Baylor basketball through the years. Like, the good teams are the ones that get after it defensively and get a little nasty and have a little edge to them. And I just haven't seen that since Baylor won the national championship. They've completely lost that part of them. So. Yeah, I'm left from that game thinking, is the story more Michigan State getting back on track, or is it that Baylor's fraudulent? And the answer might be both, or it could be neither. It could be Baylor is still great and they figure it out, but I don't think they will. I think Baylor's going to blow some teams out because their offense is so good, and they're going to get hot and just like absolutely humiliate some teams. But I also think they're susceptible to this. I think just like Baylor's going to climb right back up in the rankings, and then I don't know, they'll go up against like BYU, who's going to be just as comfortable as they are running and gunning. And on that particular night, Baylor's going to hit nothing and BYU's going to hit everything, and BYU will win by 30, and everyone will be like, damn, Baylor does suck after all. And I think that's just what we're destined to see out of Baylor this year. But I don't think they're completely fraudulent, but they have some work to do in terms of defense and culture. And I mean, letting Michigan State run up and down the floor, letting Cohen Carr dunk on you like he was doing is. But at some point, I don't know. Every time you talk like that, it sounds like you're saying you have to clothesline a guy. I don't necessarily think that, but like at some point, pride has to kick in. And you have to be like, all right, enough is enough, because Michigan State was just. It looked like they were playing against nobody out there. It looked like they were just going 5-0 for a lot of that stretch, a lot of stretches of that game. Number 2 question that came out of the weekend: how good is Kansas really? Kansas beats Indiana. Great win. Assembly Hall was rocking. Trey Galloway had the game of his life. Everything's going Indiana's way. That is, I'm biased. I know. I grew up in the state. I grew up a fan of that program, but I think Assembly Hall, Allen Fieldhouse is the best arena I've ever been to. But I think Assembly Hall, under that specific circumstance where Indiana is a little bit of a home underdog, and they've got like a top 5 team coming into Assembly Hall, which sounds super specific, but it happens more often than you think. I think that's the coolest atmosphere in college basketball. That is so hard to win. It gets fucking bonkers. It's worth like 10 points for Indiana. Anytime a team that's like a top 5 team is playing an Indiana team, I know this Indiana team's unranked, but like the perfect scenario is Indiana is like somewhere between like 16 and 25. They're ranked like somewhere in there, and they're playing a top 5 team, and they're like a 3.5 point underdog. That's the formula for Assembly Hall to be rocking, and we were pretty close to that. That's pretty much exactly what was going on in this Kansas-Indiana game, and that was bearing itself out as the game was going on, and Galloway is making plays that he can make, but he's making them over and over and over again. And Khalil Ware was grabbing all sorts of rebounds, and Indiana just had the juice, and Kansas had no answer, and they're dealing with foul trouble, and it looked like a very, very sloppy game from Kansas. And then slowly but surely they're chipping away, and then in the end they make the plays. And like I said at the top, it's one of those things where it's like, that's why you're Kansas and that's why you're Indiana, and you're left just kind of scratching your head if you're an Indiana fan. You're like, how the hell did they do that? Like, we outplayed them for the entire game, and yet Indiana found a way to lose it. How did that? But like Indiana didn't really fuck it up though. So how did we? And the answer is, that's just what Kansas does, man. That's like Kansas. This Kansas team in particular. Like I don't know. I don't know if I've really been impressed watching Kansas at all this year, and yet they continue to win. Like, their offense is disgusting. It is so clunky. They have no bench whatsoever. If Bill Self could help it, he would play 4 guys. It reminds me a little bit of the 2011 Ohio State team, who was the best team in the country all year before they got upset in the Sweet 16 to Kentucky. But the 2011 Ohio State team was sort of the same way with the depth, whereas like if Thad Matta could help it, he would have played 4 guys. He would have only played Jared Solinger, David Lighty, Will Buford, and John Diebler, and that's it. And he liked Aaron Kraft enough, but Kraft was a freshman. Dallas Lauderdale, I think, started the game as a big guy, and then they'd bring in Kraft, and Dallas wouldn't really play much after that. Yeah, if he had his druthers, he would have played 4-on-4, 4-on-5 probably every single game. That's the vibe I'm getting from Bill Self. Is he trusts his core 4. The rest, he's like, I have no idea what the hell I have with the rest of these guys, and he's slowly figuring it out. And having said all that, they continue to win. And yet, even when McCullough's not great in this game and he's in foul trouble, he makes all the plays down the stretch, makes the free throws. Kansas gets the stops. They have now beaten UConn, which was at home, I know, and UConn was banged up, but UConn. I think it's UConn. It's Arizona, it's Purdue, and it's Houston, and I think that's my top tier, and I think Kansas is at the top of the second tier. But again, I'm saying that while also admitting that Kansas has beaten UConn, they've beaten Tennessee, they've beaten Kentucky, and they now have won at Indiana. So they're stacking up dubs, and it's going to be another awesome year for Kansas. And yet I watch this team, and I'm like, there's just like nothing that jumps out at me as this being an awesome basketball team. Kevin McCullough has been better offensively than I thought it would be. Like he's a go-to guy for them for sure. And that's something coming into this season that I thought they were going to miss, and they still kind of do. But he's been better than I thought he would be, because his calling card is defense, and he's been good offensively in the past. But like I didn't know if he had it in him to be the go-to guy, to be the Jalen Wilson type role. I think he does, but having said all that, like their offense just becomes very gross. Going back to what I was saying earlier about big guys, like I do like Hunter, but part of me does wonder if like he's sort of to blame for it being clunky, because he gets production, but it is having a back to the basket post up guy just brings the offense to a grinding halt, and the ball's moving all over the place, and then now all of a sudden you dump it in, and it's a lot of standing and watching, and then Hunter goes to work, and again, he's good. When he's doubled, he finds the open guy, and he can hit those baby hooks all night long, but it just kind of brings the offense to a screeching halt in a way that Kansas's offense in the past couple years has not been that way. Yeah, I can't make sense of this Kansas team. And I'll probably be saying that all the way up until Kansas is hoisting a national championship trophy, and the game will be over, and I'll be doing a national championship recap, instant reaction show, and I'll just be saying, like, was this Kansas team good or not? I couldn't really ever make sense of them. Yeah, tough one for Indiana, man. Tough. That was exactly what this IU team needed was a win like that to get them on track, and they had it. They absolutely had it, and those losses are almost worse than like just fucking it up down the stretch, because like there wasn't really anything. There wasn't a moment where you're like, well, the reason we lost that game is because X or because of Y, because of Z. You just lost the game because Kansas, whatever you want to call it, is it because was it coaching? Was it culture? Was it, I don't know what it was, but like the ball always seemed to bounce Kansas's favor. Even the free throw where Ware hits it out of bounds and then they're slowing it down and they show the replay and it bounces like kind of by the line and there's not even enough evidence to overturn that. All of that stuff feels like luck. It feels like in a vacuum you see the stuff going on and you're like, well, I'll tell you how Kansas is winning. They're lucky as shit. But over the course of the last 20 years, that always seems to happen with Kansas, and Bill Self always seems to be lucky to the point that I don't think you can blame it on luck anymore. The number 3 question I have coming out of the weekend is the best team in the country hiding in plain sight, and I'm talking, of course, about the Houston Cougars. A lot of discussion around UConn, around Arizona, around Purdue. I think obviously Purdue beating Arizona probably gives them the upper hand when you're talking about those two teams. It was a neutral court, but also if you're an Arizona fan, you're like, really, was it? It was in Indianapolis. It wasn't really that neutral to me. Be that as it may, like I do think as far as the eye test for me, those 3 teams jump out the most. When I watch Arizona, when I watch Purdue, when I watch UConn, they feel like they're a level above everyone else. Houston's been really fucking good now. Houston beats Texas A&M by 4 in Houston. It wasn't a home game, but it was in Houston. This one feels a little more neutral site, by the way, because Texas A&M is just from down the road, so it's not like Arizona. It's not like the UConn playing Gonzaga on a neutral site, but really it's in Seattle, and they have to fly across the country. Or Arizona flying across the country to play Purdue and Indy. This one felt a little more neutral. Whatever. It was in Houston. A&M, the game wasn't as close as the score indicates. A&M made it kind of interesting in the end, but Houston had total control over this to the point that I wrote this down. According to Ken Palm's little algorithm that I have never understood, but I love Ken Palm and I love the work he does, so I will continue to tip my cap to him, but do not ask me to explain what any of this shit means. Ken Palm has his little win probability thing as the game is going on, the chance that you win the game based on all sorts of factors, whatever. Houston is the only team in the country that has never had less than a 50% win probability. Not only are they undefeated, there's never been a point in any of these games that they've won where his algorithm has said, you're in trouble, this game is in jeopardy. In fact, the lowest it's ever gotten is 59.6% early in the game against Utah when they were down 12-4 less than 5 minutes into the game. Utah jumps out to a 12-4 lead on Houston, and the algorithm says that Houston has a 60% chance of winning. And then Houston comes back and ties the game, and I think they took the lead pretty quickly after they got down 8. And then it goes back up to like 70, 80, whatever else. Houston has spent this entire season, like not only have they not lost, they've not even really flirted with a loss. They Shed and Jamal Shed and LJ Cryer have been so good together. LJ Cryer does not miss. I've never seen him miss a shot ever in his career. Going back to Baylor, I don't know how he does it. I look up his stats, and they say he's shooting 40% from the three-point line. That can't be true because he does not miss. So I don't know if it's the math. I don't know if it's me. It might be me. Never seen him miss. He's incredible. Houston defensively is just as good as every Houston team is defensively. Kelvin Sampson has been out of this world and building that part of his program. Like the defense with Houston is a given year in and year out. And then you get a guy like LJ Cryer in the transfer portal who can go get you a bucket. And Jamal Shed has been awesome for Houston through the years. They are just so good and so so sure of who they are as a basketball team. There really aren't any questions around Houston. Like, they're not a perfect basketball team, but there aren't any questions in the locker room, if that made like they know who they are and they know how they're going to win the game, and they have been beating the piss out of teams. But the thing with Houston, and I have a little bit of a history with Houston fans. They were the original. I think they were the original college basketball fraud power rankings team. I think I started the fraud power rankings for the LA Clippers when Doc Rivers was the coach and Kawhi and Paul George were fucking up in the playoffs, and everyone was blaming. Everyone that was in the bubble, right? No one could figure out who to blame, and everyone was like, "This is Kawhi's fault," and everyone. Some other people were like, "No, this is Paul George's fault," and then other people were like, "Doc Rivers will never win anything again," and then I think that was the genesis of the fraud power rankings to try to figure out who should take all the blame for the Clippers sucking. But I think the first time I ever did it with college basketball was the Houston team that went to the Final Four in 2020 on the Mickey Mouse, or 2021 on the Mickey Mouse run, where they played
us.
They played you guys, yeah. They played nothing but double-digit seeds. So I have not Houston fans don't love me for that reason, I think. And the whole reason of bringing that up is that what I'm about to say next feels like I'm going back to that. I'm going back to that well. I'm not. I promise I'm not. But it needs to be said. Houston is undefeated. They have not really been challenged this year. They also do not have any massive wins. Like they won at Xavier. That's their one true road win. Xavier is 6-5 and has also lost at home to Delaware and Oakland. They beat Texas A&M. Boots Radford wasn't playing for A&M. He's their second best player, and Wade Taylor was awesome for A&M. But A&M becomes a different team if they have their second best player playing in this game. Utah and Dayton are both good wins. Dayton's a sneaky, pretty good team, by the way. But they're not great wins. And I think when you look at Houston versus some of these other top teams so far this season, Purdue has massive, massive wins over your Alabamas and your Marquettes and your Arizonas, obviously. And you just go down the line at like the teams at the absolute top, and they have wins that they can point to where they're like Arizona won in Cameron Indoor Stadium. And you don't really have that with Houston yet. Now, the part of that I want to make clear is that in the past, the part of me that's killed Houston for not really having these big wins and beating up on shitty schools, that was when Houston was in the American Athletic Conference, where they didn't have a huge conference gauntlet awaiting them. They do this year. They have the Big 12 waiting them. The Big 12 is the deepest and best league in the country. And so I don't want to – and I actually think like the non-conference schedule that Houston put together is pretty good. So this isn't Houston's fault. This isn't me saying that they're cowards or that, like I did a couple years ago when they dodged Gonzaga to play Our Lady of the Lake. I think Houston and Sampson knew what they were up against in the Big 12 play, and I think it makes a lot of sense to not step up and take massive, massive swings in the non-conference schedule. I think the non-conference schedule is fine. This is not a discussion about Houston having a cupcake schedule. This is just a discussion about, as we're trying to figure out who the best teams are, where the tiers are there great teams, are there not? Like what is the overall picture of this college basketball season looking like? And that context does matter to me. I mean, Houston is looking pretty freaking dominant, but who they're doing it against matters. So we'll find out soon enough. Houston goes to Iowa State January 9th. I think that's their first road Big 12 game. That's a tough place to play. Ames is crazy. Hilton Coliseum gets absolutely bonkers, and that'll especially be true when a top 5 team in Houston, they might be number 1 by then, comes in, and that'll be their first big test. And I think they're on the road after that too. I think they go. Oh, they are. They go to TCU. They go to TCU after that. So they got Tuesday, January 9th, they're Iowa State on the road. Then January 13th, they're at TCU. They should win both of those games. And I don't want to. I want to check myself and make sure I don't. Iowa State is an unranked team, and I don't want to move the goalposts on Houston. But like that is the only thing that's sort of missing from me definitively putting a stamp down and saying no. This is as we're talking about UConn and Arizona and Purdue and Kansas is in the mix. Obviously, Houston is the best team in the country. The only thing keeping me from doing that is that massive win, which, the Big 12 is deep and very, very good. But as far as like, as far as that massive crown jewel type win for Houston, it does sort of feel like it's just Kansas. BYU has been a ton of fun, but I think there's a belief that at some point BYU is going to come back down to earth. I don't know if that's necessarily true, by the way. BYU is so fun to watch. They've been really, really good. So like you're looking like Texas was supposed to be awesome. I don't know how. Yeah, the Big 12 is going to be a gauntlet, but Houston. I wish we could have seen Houston against an Arizona. I wish we could have seen Houston against a Purdue or a Marquette or whatever else in the non-conference. We didn't, but be that as it may, they're waxing the shit out of everybody. So that still remains a question. But shout out to Houston. They got a good thing going. So that's it. Those are my questions. I'm trying to figure out how good Kansas is. I'm trying to figure out, is Houston the best team? Because I think they might be. I think I would vote Houston number 1 in the poll, which is coming out a little bit later today as we're recording this. So everyone listening, it is out.
Mm-hmm.
Who's number 1? Purdue.
Yep.
Number 2, Kansas.
I don't know. Do you want a stat that backs up Houston though?
Hit me with it. I love good stats.
This is the first stat that I've seen so far this year. That's if these teams do this, then they're guaranteed to win the national championship.
Yeah.
Since the release of the net, every single national champion was ranked in the top 5 on December 15th. The top 5 on December 15th was Purdue, Baylor, BYU, Houston, and Arizona. That's moved around.
Purdue, Baylor, BYU, Houston. That feels right. I mean, BYU is the one that stands out as that's a little crazy. But I'm telling you, man, if you watch this BYU team,
yeah.
If BYU had UCLA jerseys, people would be taking them very seriously as Final Four caliber team. But the Big 12 is going to be an absolute gauntlet, and BYU and Houston both stepping into the league at the same time. That is kind of an under the radar thing though. That BYU is this fucking good, and they're joining the Big 12 at a time when the Big 12 is we're gonna find out. We're gonna find out soon enough just how good both those teams are. But yeah, that's the top 5. There was another one about the Week 6 AP poll top 12 or something. Did you see that?
Yeah.
That graphic that's going around. It's like your national champion is gonna come from one of these 12. But every year, the national champion finds a way to do something different that hasn't ever been done before.
Right.
And then
last year, I think it was the first 4 seed.
Yeah, and then we take that and we just, instead of being like, oh yeah, all those formulas we had, none of them mean anything.
Yeah.
We just go, let's just tweak the formula and take that one little oddity that they had that no one else has had. Let's fold that into the formula and then keep it moving. And if a team from outside the top 12 does do this, they'll just move the numbers and they'll be like, no team outside the top 38 in the Week 6 AP poll has ever won a national championship. If we're doing tiers, I would do. I still think Kansas is on the second tier. I think Kansas is. I think their resume is 1 seed. I think Kansas has been awesome in terms of winning basketball games, but yeah, I can't. They're not really fun to watch. Kansas is not really fun to watch. Now, if I was a Kansas fan, winning is fun to watch. I like winning, but this Kansas team has not been super fun to watch. I don't know that they're breaking my brain, TJ. They're breaking it because who gives a shit if they're fun to watch? But also, I give a shit. I do. And Purdue and UConn and Arizona and Houston, those are the 4 to me that there have been very, very long stretches of games where I've watched them and I've been like, nobody's stopping this team. And, all of them except for Houston have in fact been stopped. But those are the 4 to me that kind of stick out. In fact, I'd say Purdue, UConn, and Arizona are on their own tier. Houston is on their own tier, and it's just a matter of whether that tier is above Purdue, UConn, and Arizona or below it. And that much I don't know. And then I think it's your Kansases. It might just be your Kansases. Marquette's up there, but Marquette, that game against St. Thomas, Marquette just can't help but fuck around every so often. Marquette's getting a little cute with it at times. I don't know. It's going to be a fun tournament. I guess that's the takeaway. It's going to be a fun tournament because I do think there is sort of a separation of the top with the rest of the country, but I don't think anybody in I don't think Illinois fans are looking at Purdue and saying, how the hell are we going to beat those guys? I think Illinois fans like their team. I think like a school like North Carolina and Kentucky, these two teams that they have, North Carolina and Kentucky, aren't as good as teams in the past have been at North Carolina and Kentucky, but I think both of those schools are like, I like what I've seen so far. I think there's a path where March rolls around, and I'm feeling really, really, really good about our guys. Villanova, Virginia is a fascinating team. Virginia keeps winning, except that one time they got blown out by Wisconsin and scored 41 points. And then their last game against, I think that was their last game, was this weekend against Northeastern. They won by 2. Yeah, Virginia is a team that could definitely win the ACC, and every time you watch them, you're like, this is not a good basketball team, and they just keep winning. It's setting up to be an awesome tournament. I'm excited for what I'm seeing out of college basketball so far. Other things to talk about before we get out of here. Shout out to Creighton, beat Alabama. Bama goes 4 for 22 from the three-point line. This was two make shots programs playing each other. My concern with Bama this year is that they play no defense whatsoever. And last year, Bama had a great offense that could run the score up on anybody. But like, what made that Bama team good? And I'm resisting making jokes about Bama because a lot come to mind. But I saw Rico was at the game, by the way.
Yeah.
He went to Omaha for the.
It's his Christmas gift from his family.
So funny. But what made Bama so good last year and why they were the number 1 seed in the tournament, the number 1 overall seed, was they were really, really good defensively. They were incredible defensively. They had so much length and so much athleticism, and they just shut teams down. And then on top of it, they had an offense that was run and gun, and they could score with the best of them. And this year they have the offense. I do not think they have the defense by any stretch of the imagination. And with that being said, good luck trying to figure out how good Alabama actually is. They could beat anybody. They could lose to anybody. They had that shot at the buzzer to send it to OT that was halfway down. That was wild. But yeah, shout out to Creighton beating Bama. Shout out to Memphis, who's rolling a little bit. Beat Clemson, who was previously undefeated. Villanova beat the snot out of Memphis in the Atlanta's title game. Then they lose to Ole Miss the next game in a game that, if I remember right, they let that one slip away. I feel like Memphis was, if memory serves, they were up in that one and then just kind of squandered it down the stretch. But otherwise, Memphis has been putting together a hell of a season and is very much in position to disrupt Florida Atlantic's first year in the American Athletic Conference. They don't play each other, by the way, Florida Atlantic and Memphis. The first time they play each other, and they do play each other twice, Sunday, February 25th. It is almost March. They play February 25th in Memphis, and then they play March 9th to close the season at Florida Atlantic. So they really backloaded that schedule. The conference knew what they were doing, that we're going to be in mid-February, and there's a world where both of those teams are undefeated in conference play, and it's setting up for a home-and-home situation to determine the American crown. But, yeah, Memphis is playing great basketball. They got Virginia at home on Tuesday this week, tomorrow, or today for everybody listening and watching, which will, probably be a disgusting game of basketball, and Virginia will win 54-51. And I'll have to say Virginia's good, but I miss Virginia being fun to watch. Which, like, most people would say Virginia was never fun to watch. They were very fun to watch. When the national title teams, they had like that stretch from like, was it 12? Was it 2012? No, it was like 13 or 14. Maybe it was like 14. I don't know. There was a stretch from like 14, 15, 16 up to somewhere. Maybe it started in 15. Maybe 15 was their first. 15, I know for a fact they had an awesome team. Because 15 they were undefeated until Duke beat them in Charlottesville. And I think 15 was the year they won, like they were like 30-2 or something entering the tournament. That stretch from like 15 to 19 when they won the national championship, all those Virginia teams were so fun to watch to me. Everyone was going crazy about how unwatchable they were because they would win low-scoring games, but I freaking loved watching Virginia basketball during that era. And I don't know, I've come around to like where everyone else was 8 years ago with them now, where I'm just like, yeah, you're winning, but can we get where's Malcolm Brogdon, dude? Where's Kyle Guy and Ty Jerome? I miss those guys so much. They were so fun to watch. Where's DeAndre Hunter? Reese Beekman's just not doing it for me, but whatever. Anything else? Any other shout-outs? Shout out the Buckeyes beating UCLA. Absolute stinker of a game. It was brutal to watch. Ohio State made 1-3, and it was like a panic 3 with the shot clock winding down late in the game, where we just kind of threw it up, hoping for the best, and it went in. We were 0 for 14 from the three-point line before hitting that. I think UCLA only hit 1 3 too. Just a disgusting, disgusting basketball game, but very important game because we have to win the CBS Classic. That's important for me that Ohio State wins when we play in the CBS Classic, because when they announced the CBS Sports Classic 10 years ago, I think it was the first one, everyone rightfully saw the 4 teams taking part, and they're like, what is Ohio State doing there? That's the redheaded stepchild of this group. UCLA, North Carolina, Kentucky. Why are the Buckeyes? Who invited these clowns to the party? We've won 5 of the last 6, and the one that we lost was last year against North Carolina in Madison Square Garden, when North Carolina needed like a string of 12 miracles to beat us, just to send it to overtime, and then they beat us in overtime, which a win is a win. We fucked it up. We should have won. But we play well in this event. The Buckeyes have been playing well in the CBS Sports Classic, which is why I typically like going to it. It's always a fun weekend for me. That we for all the jokes everyone wanted to make about why is Ohio State included in this, I think Carolina has the best record in the event. We're second. We're even better than Kentucky. So yeah, another W for the Buckeyes in the CBS Classic. I'm not doing it. I'm not buying back in until I'll tell you when I'm buying back in. In fact, I'm going to do that right now. That's how we're going to end the shows. I'm going to figure out when I'm buying back into Ohio State basketball, because that game, it was a win against UCLA, but that was certainly. So we got New Orleans at home. That's not going to do it. West Virginia and Cleveland. I think me and Nick and KB are going to that game, by the way. I think they're West Virginia guys, and I'm obviously Buckeye. I think we're going to go to Cleveland together. We have Rutgers at home. We have Indiana away and Wisconsin at home. Okay, so if we win all of those, I'm back in. We have to win all of those. We definitely have to beat New Orleans and West Virginia. We definitely have to beat Rutgers at home, because Rutgers stinks. TJ's already given up on this season. And then the 2 big ones are going to be at Indiana and Wisconsin at home. Both winnable games. I'd like to think we'd be favored in both of those. Indiana could get dicey. It depends on how much juice the Indiana fans bring. But I think on a neutral court we're definitely better than Indiana. It's just Assembly Hall gets a little crazy. And Wisconsin at home, we should beat them. We should beat Wisconsin at home. Yeah. So if we win all those games, I'm back in. But until then, I'm cautiously optimistic. I think that might be it. Anything else? Do we have anything else?
DeMarcus Cousins just signed with the Taiwan Beer Leopards.
The Beer Leopards is their name?
Yeah. Cody sent us a tweet.
Oh, my God.
For a 10-day and a 4-game period. So.
Taiwan Beer Leopards? That's incredible. What's the thought behind that?
Beer Leopards?
Just, no, like signing a 10-day contract with the Taiwanese.
Money.
Duh.
I don't know how much money they have, but.
But it can't be that much. Yeah, maybe it is. Maybe it is. I guess it is. But I'm sure it's like, how much money could it be to make that worth it for him? I guess 10 days isn't that much work. I don't know. That's just interesting to me. It feels like just you're signing it's going to take you 10 days to get there and back.
Right.
Just the flights alone would just be like, I don't know if it's worth it. Play 4 games. How much is he making for 4 games, I wonder?
The only other thing I had was, do you want to do a check-in on the Barstool Plays you fraud watched last week? Was there any response from Roan or Jeff D? I know that
Jeff D. Lowe texted me and was like, my bad, dude. I didn't realize. And we kind of hashed it out. And I knew in the moment when I put Jeff D. Lowe on the fraud power rankings that some of the responsibility was on me to not text. I should have texted him the day of and said, we still good to do the show. But yeah, Jeff D. Lowe was like, I was at the office all day and you never, I guess he was upstairs and I was down here and we were just ships in the night passing. But yeah, we smoothed that over. Roan I have not talked to, but that's because Roan knew what he was doing, which is just dropping a stick of dynamite and just walking away and letting it explode. And, you know, Roan was not trying to get in on the beef. He was just trying to start it. He was just trying to start a fight and then step away. So yeah, Ronan and I. The one person I have heard from is Billy Football sent me a DM from Africa, and he said, "My bad, dude. Didn't mean to like come at you like that. Was just trying." Because Billy Football tweeted in response to the game. He said, "I will lock up at Club Trillion." So then I talked some shit back, and then Billy DM'd me and was like, "I didn't mean anything by that. Just trying to start a little friendly banter." And then I responded to him, and I said, "Too late. I've already burned the Billy's List hoodie that I was the only person in the world that had." But shout out to Billy. They scored in that Africa Bowl I saw. Billy had at least one touchdown pass, so he's making great strides. I think if they keep playing that over and over, I think in the next 5 years they might win one at the pace that they're on, because they seem to be improving a lot. But they did in fact lose, didn't they? Is that they lost again?
Yes.
Damn. Another L for Billy Football. You can't spell Billy without two L's, I guess.
Shit.
Damn. All right. I think that's it. Yeah, that's it. I'll do a cold ass white boy power rankings. That's my Christmas gift to all the listeners. We'll do an update. And I have to think long and hard about this Purdue situation, because they do have two cold ass white boys, but it's Purdue basketball, man. And I think that's just like a hurdle that's very tough to overcome. Is that yes, they are cold ass white boys, but if you are such a cold ass white boy, if you are in fact such a cold ass white boy, why do you play for Purdue? Those Purdue jerseys, by the way, are they joking? Are you fucking shitting me, Purdue? They wore these last year too. Those jerseys with the tiny ass numbers. What are they doing? I don't get that at all. They are the coolest looking jerseys until you look at the numbers, and the numbers look like they bought the wrong size, and they were like, screw it. We gotta just put what we have on there. We can't go get bigger numbers. They look comically small on Purdue, and they wear those jerseys all the time, and it's very frustrating. I don't know. I need some answers there. All right, that's the show. See you guys on Friday.